representation to me is like seeing yourself, and like in general I talk a lot about being seen and feeling heard, and vice versa. So I think it's very much that. um, yeah, if all you're seeing on TV is white people, then it's like, oh well, how am I going to get there? Yeah.
I feel like for me, I want to see more of the intersectionality of blackness and queerness, because I think that's a big intersection within itself, but there's so many other intersectionalities from, you know, you have black queer people that are neurodivergent, you have black queer people that are disabled, you have folks that are encompass these so many so many different identities. I feel like I think what I want to see at its core is more, and I think this is just media in general, more rawness and realness.
I think a lot of them kind of cater to like black and queer stereotypes in general, which I think has some overlap of like being loud and like being extra and flamboyant, which is fine. I don't necessarily always think that's a bad thing, but I think sometimes it becomes like these people being like not being, but like coming across as a caricature, maybe.
Yeah, there's definitely like stereotypes and the kind of thing you expect to see, and everything's kind of labelled. I feel like a lot of people are very close-minded. I think our generation is like one of the pioneers for like change, but like even like with the school curriculum, it's very, like straight-centered, I guess.
I also think about how little history we are given, both again from the black community and the queer community. And so I wonder like how our sense of belonging in this present time would be so much greater if we knew, oh, there's a book, or this was written down, or this was documented.
Yeah, what are we consuming? Is it kind of, for me, if I think about who I am and perhaps the community that I'm part of, are we consuming people that don't challenge in a way that, we need to really engage with? It's easier to kind of like, I watch RuPaul, I switch on, I watch it, I turn off. It does challenge me in some ways, because I think that actually RuPaul is quite a challenging person, and a lot of what happens on the shows that, he's part of and some of the discussions that take place on those shows are challenging, but it's a different kind of challenging, I guess.
I guess when we think about acceptable queerness and like what is palatable, if that's the word, to like the general audience, because even when I've seen like doing performance stuff and the crowds that we perform to, if it's sort of like either a straight crowd or a white crowd, they like gag for like the male queer people who are like dressed feminine, that are very flamboyant, very out there. But any other queerness that is maybe more like, I don't know, angry, or if we have rage that is completely necessary and needs to be heard, but obviously to them it's like, we just want to have a fun time, we want to see the fun out of it, like that's all we want from you, yeah, so I don't think people like to see anything that challenges them.
I think we're making some good steps in general in terms of like queer representation, which is very cool. But I think that especially when you chuck like being trans in the mix as well, some people are like, whoa, that's a bit mad. So I think that how that's shown, not has to, but like a lot of it is shown with like drag, I find, and I feel like people automatically think a gay man, he does drag. Yeah, so I feel like that's a thing that's out there, which is fine, but also like not all the time. Loads of people do drag.
I feel like drag is a really important and interesting topic, because I know that some people see drag as problematic, and also sometimes if, say, it's like a cis man doing drag, whether they're a cis queer man or not, or even like someone like Tyler Perry, in films where people dress up as like women and do that sort of thing. And it's sort of like, is this furthering misogynoir? Like, are Black cis men like perpetuating more marginalization towards Black women? There's things like that. And then on the flip side, drag artists themselves are like not having necessarily like autonomy when they're performing as well, like and whether they're Black queer performers, people feel like they still have access to their bodies, which is yeah, it's kind of gross.
If we think about RuPaul and if we think about entertainment in the queer scene, it is kind of typically aligned with drag. I would say maybe Vogue is now being like penetrated because of mainstream media, but I think it's been drag, and that says something because typically the people in drag are males. It's males still living as cis males and only operating or engaging with queerness in a certain extent, and whether that is if they are homosexual or bisexual or whatever on the spectrum, there is a certain level of if you think of it in terms of like the hierarchy, black women presenting in whatever way will never have that authority or that space or that power to dominate.
Hiya, my name is Farrell Cox. I'm a physical performer and aerialist, specialising in a thing called tippy hoop, and I also do wire work. My reason for doing this is I'm Black, queer, and done. The themes that I responded to are authenticity and quirkiness, because queerness to me is all about my weirdness and how weird I am. And I know there's trauma around queerness and stuff, but for me, it's how I found myself. It's how I discovered my blackness and how weird I am, and I'm inspired by like Grace Jones and Nina Simone and Prince, and just the way they wear their queerness. They're icons in their own right, and my brain feels like that sometimes. My brain feels bright and sparkly and colourful and very exaggerated, and that's why I did this, to show that side of queerness, and that's, I guess that's what resonates with me.
it's just super rare for us in the UK to see Black queer performance or even visual art, and know that it was made specifically for Black queer people or by Black queer people. Sometimes it's a collaboration effort, but I just think that that glass ceiling, if it's high, if it's a glass ceiling for like white women and white men and things like that, the glass ceiling is real low for us. It's like you just stand up and then there's the ceiling, you know? So I feel like we might not be able to pull so many successful UK Black queer artists from memory because we haven't seen that representation before.
I think there needs to be more education around like people of colour and queerness. I feel like there's a lot of negative stereotypes to see online, and people have this one idea, or they don't really like have the time to explore it. And if there's more like media forms, like TV shows or in the news, or even like representation in the BBC, stuff like that, maybe people wouldn't have such a negative kind of like connotations.
I want to see more folks that don't necessarily fit the ideal idea of what it means to be queer or trans or whatever, and I want that to be able to open up for people to realize that queerness and transness and all these identities don't have a look. They can look however that person shows up in the world, and that is valid. And I think that gives more people more courage and security to know that they can show up in this world just who they are or however they show up that day.
But yeah, the media, because media is kind of also beholden to the politics of whichever nation it's in, it can't always do the job of like fully showing up for us, which is why like you can't really turn to media for that sense of like belonging, but only within communities that you find yourself for that sense of belonging. And then within those communities you can laugh at the media and be like, did you see what they did? That was ridiculous. And that's useful and powerful too.
I don't know if you guys include nightlife within the arts, but nightlife is the place that I have mostly seen Black queer representation. I think, to me, a club night is an art form because it can go wrong very easily. But I think of in like 2016, 2017 times in London, especially, we had like collective forming like Babes, we have Pussy Palace, we have Queer Bruck, and we have these spaces where performers can come and audiences come, and we all just know that this space is for like hedonism, enjoyment, like to relax. I specifically think of one time I went to a Babes party, some tiny little place in Peckham. It's just etched in my mind. As soon as we walked into it, like it's just full of beautiful Black people. They're mixing our type of music that we want to listen to, and we know that you can be all of yourselves in this space, you know. And I think that nightlife probably doesn't get as much recognition in the mainstream media because how do you boil down everything that happens into a club and present it? I mean, the night we went, I think Vice did a documentary. I know that Pussy Palace has been in vogue, but once it becomes exposed to those big mainstream media spaces, something about the night gets watered down. It's not just for us anymore. And I think there's a tension there of when we create as Black artists and we invite audiences and things like that, we are creating safe spaces for ourselves and for each other, but how then do we elevate it and allow other audiences to come in without diluting what we've created?
MJ, I completely hear you, and I agree with every single thing you said. But you know, in this, I don't know. I'm trying to look for the right way to say this, but I don't. I don't think the problem is with us. I mean, of course, it's not us; it's them. And when I say them, I use that term loosely, like everyone else, the world in general, the world at large, because it's a thing of how do we share this safe space that we've created with this very intense work and this very this very vulnerable piece that we've created with the world on a larger scale without having to water it down to fit into the heteronormative stereotype or to make someone else feel comfortable. Because if you really think about it, that's where the problem is. Where you share this, when you share this very deep and passionate and very raw um, side piece of yourself to the world to see via ads, you're termed words like, "Oh, that's a bit aggressive," is used. Words like, "Oh, you're trying to shove your sexuality down my throat." They start throwing words like that at you. They start saying stuff like, "Oh, I'm straight. You don't see me creating peace, celebrating my straightness and trying to get you to get into you that." So I don't think it's a we problem, more like a reorientation for every other person out there. There's something I like to say. I feel like everyone needs to be able to need to possess the traits to be able to unlearn so they can relearn. Because a lot of people out there, even educated people, they feel like, oh, they're very liberated and very educated, still they're still bound by the shackles of ignorance and the shackles of pride, because a lot of people feel so proud in what they already know, they're going to refuse to unlearn, or they're going to refuse when you tell them what you know is incomplete, what you know is not the right representation of my reality. You don't live my reality, let me explain my reality to you. It literally goes over their head as you being aggressive or you being dramatic. So this ceiling, that is this glass ceiling that is placed over our head, it's not even by us, it's by society at large, it's by the world that keeps saying, "Oh yes, you've got a voice, yes, yes, you can say what you want to say, but don't say it too loud." So what they've basically done is, "Oh, be yourself, but don't be yourself like that, be yourself in a certain way that makes me comfortable."
I feel like, quite frankly, I feel like the way that queerness is presented right now, it's kind of whatever fits into the binary. I think there's certain Black queer creators that, have had the privilege of either transitioning or presenting more on in a certain way, or I don't know, just have a certain look or whatever that relays more to a more broader audience. I think what is created is to be more palatable to cisgendered heterosexual people, because that's, I think, the center of, like, everything.
Mainstream is mainstream, yeah, but at the same time it can be subjective. Before mainstream became mainstream, it was weird. People were like, "What are you guys doing?" And I'm talking about the regular heteronormative world out there. Like when they decided what that niche that has been carved as mainstream now at first was frowned upon. And I'm not even trying to sound sentimental, but I feel like our community is very strong, very talented, very diverse, and just we face everything that's thrown at us.
Hello, my name is Phillips Francis. I'm an actor, writer, content creator, social media enthusiast, fashion enthusiast. I do so much, sorry. So I picked this project to be a part of it because as a Black queer artist, I grew up in Nigeria. I've never actually openly spoken about my sexuality, and this is going to be the first time I'm doing that, which I'm pretty excited about. I wanted it to mean something. I wanted to be part of a project that was forced. So I just didn't want to waste my first time on something below par. That's why I picked Black Queer and Done. And the theme I picked is my queer me, is because, like I said earlier on, as a Black gay man that was born and raised in Nigeria, there's a lot of preconceived notion about what it is to be gay, and very uninformed notions actually. Like, people think of your sexuality as a whole and they reduce it down to sex, and that's very offensive and annoying. So I'm just like, you know what? Yes, I did grow up in an environment and with family that supported me and allowed me to grow and be myself. I think it's time for me to, in as much as it's not in my place to educate people, because I feel like people should go out there and educate themselves, I feel like I need to get the ball rolling, and this project is the perfect way to do that, to let people understand that there's no one way, there's no manuscript for being gay, and I can be gay and still be a talented, beautiful Black man, and that in no way emasculates me or make me any less of a person. So that's how I'm doing this project, guys.
Growing up gay in the Western world is very different from growing up gay in Nigeria, especially in the early 2000s. Sorry.
Just
Never done this before.
What do you mean?
Like, sit in front of someone and talk about my life, my sexuality. a big part of me is so scared, and I don't even know what I'm afraid of. Sorry, I'd like to withhold my name for the purpose of this documentary, and if possible, can you blow out my face in the post production, please?
Yeah, I'm sure we can do that.
Thank you. I wrote down my points. It's something I tend to do when I'm nervous. When I tell boys that I'm gay, the first thing they do is move away from me swiftly, like I have some kind of ailment. And then the second thing they do is they say, I cover my nyash with the blood of Jesus. I don't I don't know if that makes me angry or amused. Amused at the fact that they think that I'm even remotely sexually interested in them. Angry at the fact that they've reduced my entire identity into just sex. I'm asexual anyways, so jokes on them. And when I tell girls that I'm gay, they will want to start calling me bitch or sister girl or ask us to paint each other's nails. I appreciate the love. I do. I really do. But just because I'm gay doesn't mean that I'm more inclined to liking the feminine things. Some even go a step further and be like, oh my god, I've always wanted a gay best friend. I'm not an accessory or a pet. I live every day of my life in fear. Some people see me and think I'm a perv. Others think I'm a freak, and you reduce my entire identity into the gay best friend. Being gay is not a one size fits all outfit from Primark. This is my reality. It's my identity. It's my life. Please, educate yourself.
Black people, like, we just have this magic, this sauce, this beauty in us that just creates like these beautiful pieces of art that just comes. I think that's just how we divinely were made. It's just like you just were sprinkled with a little bit of creative magic. As things become more palatable, I think black queer folks are expected to kind of align themselves within what has already been presented. When it's like, we're not trying to align with this, we're trying to create something new. We don't align with this because, like, being a white queer person, being a black queer person is a very different identity, very different way lived experience. And I think that they do have white queer people do have a lot of privilege in the fact of, like, let me put it this way. I feel like white queer people, they got one battle in just those two identities, they got one battle. When you're black and queer, you got two battles. You got that extra battle you have to deal with. You have to deal with walking around this world as a black individual, and you have to deal with the weight of sometimes walking this world, because I don't think they can be necessarily separated, but as a black queer individual. And I think those two things offer very different but very real struggles that a white queer person will never have to navigate and never have to really confront in a personal way.
I've certainly noticed that, you know, a lot of my white friends or white colleagues will now have much more conversations about what is actually going on here and about racism between us. Whereas I think it used to be something that white people among themselves didn't really used to talk about. I'm hopeful that there is something sort of more kind of productive happening, although obviously lots more needs to. And what you kind of made me think about as well, MJ, is because I teach at a university, and then I was thinking as well, you know, we kind of meet these students and then want to take them on a process where they might also start to engage with those conversations as well. But I think actually what we find is some of these institutions that might be geared up to create artists or to feed into kind of like the ecosystem that supports arts, they only reflect one experience as well, really. And I think that's very much the case where I work, that, you know, it feels like we're only really able to reflect the kind of mainstream, I guess, or white experience. And no matter how much we try to broaden that out, there isn't enough happening quick enough for us to actually do that in the kind of radical way that I think needs to happen. And then that makes me worry that, you know, like we're kind of perpetuating this, that people come to university, they don't see themselves represented, they're not taught stuff that is necessarily relevant to them. We're not challenging people in the right ways to try and do the things that I think we need to do. And that all of these things, even if we're just thinking about the arts, in some ways it's bigger than the arts, because it's across society. We see this happening in multiple spheres that I think makes it really difficult for people then.
I think when we look, I don't know, like more within ourselves and what we want to see within communities, and being really honest with ourselves, like just because we're marginalized, it doesn't mean that we don't recreate harm in some way and oppress others in our own ways and with our own privileges. And I think unless we look at that within our own communities and within ourselves, then I think it's impossible to move forward and to actually break through these barriers.
I'm not so sure whether like Black queer people within the arts are reproducing violent structures for themselves, and it's for me it's really something that is coming from the something external. So because you can only be like this one Black queer person working for this institution, it's gonna propel competition with other Black queer artists, because you know that they can only be one, right? So I think it's all they can only be one.
Hunger Games.
So yeah, but it's linked to the funder question as well. Yeah,
because I think as well, like, when we're looking for funding, or like I know that when I'm applying for funding, you have to play up those aspects, like, I'm Black and queer and working class, like, give me money, look at all the trauma and oppression I've been through, like, I deserve the coin. And it's kind of like, let's like squeeze as much coin out of them as possible, but also it's like, well, in an ideal situation, I just want to be able to, I don't know, like do some nature writing and go to the forest and talk about leaves like white people do. Like, why can I not do that? Do you know what I mean? But I feel like when I'm applying for funding, it never feels like it's going to be good enough. So you always have to add these layers upon layers upon layers.
When the healing hasn't been done within the wider society, you reflect those things back to you. It's the same way a child learns from its parent a way to behave and then repeats it as they grow up. I think specific examples, like Sim said, we have high instances of domestic violence within the queer community, but we also have these, like, how do I say it, superficial things, the type of bodies we see, the type of people that get elevated to the top. I've seen examples on Grindr. Now, I'm not a gay man, so I'm speaking out of my range here, but I've seen examples of people being like, no fats, no femmes, no blacks, and things of that sort, which just replicates the same no dogs, no Irish, no blacks that we used to see on pubs. And it's like, as a wider society, until we unlearn that, then it's going to be replicated and repeated again and again.
My name is Sim. I am a movement artist, a facilitator, writer, part-time alchemist. I wanted to be a part of Black Queer and Done because it's just so, I feel like it really speaks to you on a level, and you know that you can really take it wherever you want to take it. And there was so much room for exploration, because obviously we all know that like being black and being queer isn't a monolith. None of us are the same, but in the wider society, like we've spoken about before, it's people have these ideas of us, and being able to unpack that and just allow our like subconscious and our interest to sort of just play out on the stage, I think it's really nice. So I chose It's Giving Thanks, and I think maybe it touches on other themes as well, because when I was sort of developing it, I was like, is this as celebratory as I intended it to be? But I think sometimes celebration isn't always like we're jumping up and down and we're like screaming. It's the softer moments, those moments of peace, those moments of offering, of meditation, and just feeling like you're really in touch, you know? I think this piece is quite personal to me because I feel like it touches on different parts of my spiritual practice, and sort of also being mixed black, so I have loads of different heritages like amalgamated into one body, but also knowing that my blackness isn't erased by anything else, and knowing that the different practices from my different ancestries all can tie together and work in harmony. It doesn't have to be completely separate things. So it really sort of it all kind of ties together within me, and I hope that I kind of show that on the stage as well.
Above ground, below heaven, knotted together with loose string, a familial past available only through an intrinsic remembering. String weaved through muscle, sewn into ancestral geographies both known and unknown and yet to discover. One body that spans, expands, and exceeds time. Is this skin thick enough to hold all these stories? To look back is to take one step forward. To know that living betwixt states of being is to be deep in worship. To see all that the mortal eye can bear witness to. Permanently existing in liminal spaces is preparing the vessel for possession. Let me rephrase. Permanently existing in liminal spaces is preparing the body for knowledge, embracing mutations. Understanding the gallery in Mesopotamia who castrated themselves in honor of Cybele. Understanding Amazon warriors of Dahomey who would remove the right breast so as to better hold their weapon. Understanding. A malleable body is a blessed body. A malleable body sees gender as optional, not default. A malleable body is made to shapeshift, and shapeshifters live beyond restrictions of flesh. Our ancestors scarred, stretched, and molded to honor, respect, celebrate. I choose to ungender myself, not in the way of forced dominion, no, in the way of looking back, of having the privilege to choose, of soft, gentle refusal. Or perhaps it isn't refusal, but acceptance, surrender. Let's shift the lens, bring it back to us. Are they ever forced to go back, to recognize the rot in their roots, to and reconstruct again? Let's shift the lens, bring it back to us. My fist pushes through the chest cavity, reaching further, clasping my hand around each moment we were forced into molds of concrete, to dissipate, suffocate. I transmute these moments in my palm. To look back is to take one step forward. Past and future bearing no distinction. Post-colonial without the fancy jargon, just remembering, breathing. Deep inhales unlocking the knots that keep us tense in the present. My roots entangle themselves in communion. The Celtic, the pagan, the Rasta, the Christ-like, the witch, the demon, the Hebrew, fusing together and setting into one tongue. A taste of nostalgic deja vu, knowing we've been here before. But I can look back and step into a diverging lane, all and one of us.
I feel like it is core. I feel like in a lot of ways, white queerness had to emerge before black queerness started emerging. Like, I feel like you think of the earliest, well, because this the thing is like, it's not like black queer people weren't there. It's just how much, like, how do I explain this? Like, you know, a lot of people try to say like, oh, like, what's this new thing of pronouns and trans people and all this stuff. It's like, now trans people always been there. It's just how much visibility were they given. So I feel like black queerness has always been there. It's just how much visibility was it given. I think a lot more of its visibility was given to white queer people.
Well, I think with white queer representation, a lot of the time it's like traditionally, and you could argue that this is like any kind of representation, but it's like traditionally attractive people who are like slim, maybe a bit quirky. Yeah. Whereas I feel like in general with black representation, the stereotypes of black people are really played up. Of like black women are curvy and like bigger, which, you know, fair, fine. I'm not sure if that overlaps with queer. I've never thought about this before. Oh, I don't know. I think that yes, there is a difference in terms of like. I think that being black and queer and being white and queer is a very different thing because you've got not all the time, but like another obstacle of like, okay, I'm queer, but I'm black, and being black means that like I didn't. I think especially with like black men as well, like black queer men, I think there's this the heightened and like toxic masculinity is a lot more than white men, and there's the assumption that like queer people in general are like weaker and like fags and whatever. So I think that for some people they really struggle with it, whether like a black person being gay. What?
I think the differences are that black LGBT people have more of like a journey towards self-acceptance because of how the family structure usually works. It's very much your parents are like heads of the household, but then they also determine who you end up becoming more, I think, in black households. And so I think within white households, white LGBT people may be more comfortable coming out and being like, this is who I am. You can accept me, or you cannot accept me. But for maybe a black kid, that could be quite a violent thing to do.
I think as a black queer person, it's like kind of different in terms of the kind of the religion within the black community and how a lot of them are Christian or Muslim, and it's not the kind of thing you can talk about with your parents. So when you're trying to find yourself, it's hard because your parents won't really like be there. So it's kind of why he turns to being like, you know, online or finding like things on like social media, stuff like that.
I feel like within blackness, you can't forsake your religion and that kind of like traditional culture as easily. And that religion and traditional culture is kind of often like the antagonist towards being your full self. And so within maybe white culture, that decoupling of like, oh, I can be a person without a religion is so much more accessible, while being a black person without religion has to be for a reason. It has to mean something, because in a way you're breaking away from your family heritage or like what your grandmother did and what your great grandmother has been doing. And so, and they did it mostly as like a means of spiritual survival, because, you know, material survival wasn't as easy to come by, but as long as like you are within your religion and yourself spiritually, you feel safe. So it's leaving one safe space, going into another. Yeah, it's just the uncomfortability of leaving something that could have protected you and being able to protect yourself in yourself. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Stanley Yanu, and I'm a spoken word poet and writer. And the reason I'm a part of this project is because I felt that it's such a beautiful celebration of queer Black art and artists. I love the fact that we've got different types of performers and artists, writers, singers, and dancers, and I kind of wanted to see what they do. And I think that especially in the UK, we've kind of seen it that there's not too much of a celebration of kind of queer Black art or people, and it just seemed like something beautiful to be a part of. And in terms of the topic, I picked My Queer Me because what I liked about it is that it discusses the quirkiness but also the complexity of queerness, that where everyone's experience isn't always the same. And I think how I tried to explore that was through my poem Lasagna. And kind of the idea was basically like to have I had different parts in my mind, and I had this image in my head of a house, and I had like a bathroom, a bedroom, living room, the balcony, and I wanted to kind of discuss how the speaker in the poem goes through kind of the ins and outs, and whether it's an internal realization, a kind of rejection, a shame, and acceptance. And so I thought in a sense like layers. So I thought lasagna, and I do love Italian food, and that, so it does tie in quite nicely. But I thought the poem, my intention of the poem was to try to show a different sort of side of queerness through good food, basically.
One ragu. Like clockwork, I watch you in your sanctuary. In your crimson red, I inhale the passion and breathe in your doctrine. Devoted, I laid garlands at your feet. I could recite your lasagna recipe line by line. Had you turned to the camera as if staring into me. In making sure that the mince is cooked, touch it. Turn up the heat, allow it to sizzle, soaking in its juices. Watch as it stiffens. And without meaning to, he turns to me and smiles sweetly, allowing me to rest. 2. Bechamel. In this reflection, shame shrouds secrecy and seals his lips shut. I stare as it literally embalms him. I watch as he shrinks himself, fades into withdrawal. I wish I could shelter him. Tell him to look at the honest eyes staring back, reflecting love and abundance. Tell him that light shines brightly when you let it, when you stop howling at the moon. Tell him that in the fullness of himself, he is so deserving of much more than shame. 3. Parmigiano. Duty is a strange creature. How it permeates through every familial bond. How it upholds both service and self-sacrifice. How love is not always enough. 4. Buon appetito. I delve my hands into the deep and raise up the blade and stare. Watch as the shine stares back at me. Scrub off every letter like a flimsy veneer and see that it's dull and pure. The dish brush knows the secret I hide, shut behind hardened enamel. The dish brush knows I'm gay, knows how hard it is to say.
If you don't agree that appropriation is happening of Black queer media and Black queer art and Black queer creativity, click off right now and go donate to a Black queer person's mutual aid or something, because you need to do the work. You need go buy a book, and buy the right book too. Make sure it's not written by a white person, because don't learn from white people how to navigate Black space, please. Thank you.
I have so much beef with this, like in general. I hate it. I've never thought about it in terms of the queer community. Yeah. So me and my friend Krista, we talk about this sometimes, especially like on Drag Race in particular, how like, I don't want to say drag in general because like, who am I to say that? But like a lot of trends follow popular culture, and a lot of popular culture, I think, is appropriating Black people. So
I think even in the same things we were talking about in drag shows, is there cultural appropriation? Yes. Like you can just look at any season of RuPaul's Drag Race. At least one queen is going to put on an afro. The foundation colors are dark, and when the foundation comes off, it's a different person, not just because they're a drag queen, but because they lack the melanin to match the foundation. So yes, there is cultural appropriation across the board, especially in performance art, because I think wider society sees aspects of Black culture and they're like, oh, this is shiny. Let me put on some braids. Let me put on some earrings. Let me call myself Aquafina, Shakisha, or whatever, and roll my neck. And, you know, just take these tiny parts where they lack understanding and use it to perform and bring entertainment to their peers. But they don't realize where this type of body language, why we have this type of body language, why we move the way we do. It lacks any authenticity or understanding. It's not appreciation. It is definitely appropriation.
in terms of people like quote unquote like blackfishing, which is a term that I really like. So this is a hot take, but I hate fake tan. I think it's weird that people do it. I really do. I'm like, you want to look darker, but like people are naturally darker and they get shot on. Pardon. Not to like call out people with fake tan, but anyway, like that, like people making their like features look bigger, like white people wearing box braids, I think is a bit of a weird one. I'm like, you do you, girl, but I don't know about that. Yeah, things like that, just like body shapes and stuff, which again I think it's difficult to talk about without affirming stereotypes, because I don't want to do that. But yeah, things like that, I think.
Here's the thing, like if they really want it, we gotta start like packaging in something and selling it for like, we gotta sell that like for like a lot, because they just be taking it. Like you'll see so many times there'll be Black creators creating these dances, creating these movements, creating these pieces of fashion, creating culture quite frankly. And I feel like just now people are starting to be like, okay, like yeah, like a lot of stuff was created by Black and Indigenous people. Maybe we need to be more aware of that and more acknowledging of that. I forgot the question. Did you ask me if it exists? Because I feel like that's an obvious. So like what
I'm Sai. I'm a producer, singer, songwriter, and I wanted to be a part of this project because I feel it fits so perfectly. I'm Black and I'm queer, and these things are like super important to me. And while I was working on one of my projects, I was looking for a space where I can fit in my community, Black and queer, in Coventry, and this opportunity came about, and it was like, it's so perfect. I applied immediately as I saw it, and here I am today. And I was really drawn in by the theme of the quirkiness and queerness, and authenticity, because my Blackness and my queerness is such a like a cornerstone of my identity, quite obviously. But I spent a lot of my younger years in shame of these things. Not necessarily my blackness, but I did dim it because I grew up around people that weren't necessarily so similar to me in a lot of ways. So I had to dim my blackness to prove that I'm not like all the other black people. I'm different. But as I grew old, I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, I found so much pride and joy and assurance and everything in my blackness and my queerness. And the same goes to my queerness as well, being around people that weren't like me. And on this journey of artistry, I had to really learn to embrace myself and find myself as a person and as an artist to make something that's meaningful to me, but also people that's listening. And that impact is equal for both of us, to be honest. So, yeah.
Feels like I'm moving, it's strange. Feels like I'm stuck in a rut, stuck in place. Who should I blame? I'll be in my way, bring us to face. Waiting for mine to align. Reasons to put that aside. Waiting from signs from divine. Looking at the time and a peace of mind. Where should I go? Think I need to. Who should I call when I need you? Questions, no answer. Critical matter. But time's moving forward without me. And all of my worries surround me. No, I can't dream peacefully. Emotions of the day followed by the haze, heavy masquerading. Need to find a space where I can find my placement. My thoughts are demonized, spirit misaligned, and do some meditation, some solo conversations, some words of affirmation. Place I should go, think I need to. And who knows me better than I do? I'm finding some answers in spiritual matters. Still time's moving forward without me. Still all of my worries surround me. I'm just trying to dream peacefully.
Everyone knows that this is happening, because we've been forced to, because I think that's what COVID forced us. Like, the reason why people say, like, the whole thing with George Floyd dying was like his big thing, or it wasn't any different. The only difference between that and the hundreds and thousands of other Black people that have died in the hands of police violence is that this time we were forced to sit in it. Every other time we've had the luxury of capitalism distracting us, of working and doing this and doing that and going here and going there and being able to do all these things and attribute our time and energy to so many things. So when people talk about like this was such a bad thing, like how did this happen, like this is like all of us have seen this happen time and time again. The only difference is people that didn't have to deal with it before were forced to sit in it and forced to watch it and forced to actually question and sit with themselves of like, this is happening. So when I'm talking about like, I feel like now with so much things coming up of like more people talking about cultural appropriation, all these different things, it's not necessarily like whether this is happening or not. It's whether who is willing to sit in it and do the work to either be an ally and push for this to change, or do the work. Because also I think as Black folks we have our own work to do, because these systems live within us too. So it's like we have work to do too, but it's like who is willing and ready to actually do that work. And I think that's the important piece, and that's really the game changer. So it's not about whether it exists, it's not about whether or not it's happening, it's whether or not who's willing to sit with, acknowledge, and do the work for it to change.
I feel like people are afraid to like talk about race in like because they fear being racist, but like the flip side of that is like, yeah, but if you're not talking about it, then it's like you're not learning, you're not sharing your opinions, you're not challenging yourself or other people. But I don't really know how to tackle that. I don't know. I think that white people in general only want to see Black people when it's like a view they have of them in their head, which is more palatable. Not necessarily more palatable, but like a specific view they have. I think having white people not being afraid to have conversations and allowing Black people to have the space to just make stuff without it being not fetishized, but like without it being, I don't know what the word is, but put on a pedestal.
We have spent our lives connecting to other things, school, news, social media, parents, all these different places. And I think the real work is unconnecting those things and reconnecting them back to ourselves, to our truth, reconnecting to our intuition, because that is divinely guided, in my opinion, divinely guided by our ancestors, by our spirit guides, by really our core of who we are.
I think what's missing is the quietness of being queer. It's not always boom. Sometimes it's just like, oh, I think I like that, but I'm not going to do anything. But I think also the intersections of wealth and immigration status and religion in other ways will speak more to, I said that sentence so badly, but those other intersections I think will be necessary in future representation, because not every Black queer person is loud and outspoken and has enough financial security to be loud and outspoken, or maybe they're in a job that requires them to like just keep it quiet. There are other reasons why, yeah. So that's what I think is missing. Just that inner turmoil, the in-between-ness of knowing yourself, but having other things that you're beholden to. Yeah.
I think I know there's a lot of like talk on like Instagram, stuff like that, and I think a lot of minds are being more opened. And I think shows are like great representation if you want like to show it to your family and like watch this and maybe not try and mention it, trying to hint at something like that. I definitely think media representation is important, but maybe not all the time. When I'm like looking at hate comments online, kind of remind myself that it's kind of getting easier to exist as like a black queer person of color. So it's kind of like it's nice to have a community. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Ray. I'm a poet and workshop facilitator and professional eavesdropper. Yeah, I wanted to be a part of this project because I don't know a lot of black people and I thought that it would be a good opportunity to express my blackness and queerness in a safe and comfortable space that feels genuine and isn't driven by like quotas or trying to prove something inauthentic. I chose the themes of my queer and In-Between-Ness because I feel like, especially with being trans, there's a conception of like you're born, you're 5, you're aware that you're trans, and that's that. And I don't believe that's true for everyone. So I wanted to show the kind of grey area in between that. And ironically, part of this piece was inspired by a white man. But in a positive way. So I don't know. I thought that it would be interesting to have that in there.
"You're queer, aren't you?" he said, with a frown that hits his eyelashes and commands his lips into a straight line. Fight is hiding in my waistcoat as flight sits in the brim of my hat. The three of us panic as my mouth opens and closes, cat flap in the wind. He is boozy, brash, and I am unprepared to be a victim of a hate crime in the hands of Great Western Railway, or any railway for that matter. Panic pitter-patters along my gut as I shuffle in my seat slightly. I know by now that unwanted fingertips don't look good on me. Bruises aren't my colour. I can't do this again. Police station again. Blood outlining my elbow again. I don't have time to rebuild and rehome my safety again. I'm gay too, he proclaims, and you look fabulous. In an instant, I am victory. He could tell from a mile off that I reek of it. He knows my saliva is rainbow-laced, that I share a birthday with Prince, that I am homosexual first, homo sapien second, you're queer, aren't you? Each letter, confetti from the cannon, and I'm trying my best to pocket each piece. Queer got me feeling like an afternoon off, like dessert for dinner, you know. Like a vivacious vowel in a room of clumsy consonants, got me feeling like I can tick all your boxes for your quotas with my tongue and each curl on my head, like I can fill in all the in-betweens with my eyeline, like I can tell the white man in the suit that I'm black, gay, trans, partial to a bit of mental illness, and suddenly I've gone from pebbles on the curb to a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Queer got me feeling like gritted teeth, a 3-point turn. Sometimes I'm not sure if I'm a man or if I just want to be treated like one. I imagine the doctor asking me if I was race car or Barbie doll, why it's taken me so long, what it felt like when the blood ran down my thighs for the first time, like mascara past eyes, when rebellion was sneaking out to buy boys' clothes, to drown in this idea I thought I'd never be able to dip my toe into. And I'll say, I'm just trying to have a voice like Morgan Freeman and a body like Kid Cudi, man. I just want to put my hand in the fire and hear smooth jazz, man. You feel me? I'm just trying to be 10 foot tall, my dude, with a chest that falls as flat as leftover lemonade, or a lover in June, or a gay joke, or a failed attempt, or 5'10", they said, tits like medicine.
balls, hips stitched with a wide load sign. With me, you'll need a pacemaker, an inhaler. Practice your double takes for my knee highs and begging eyes, flashing melanin, rolling hips, a snake in mud, fluid passing through, red lips, hip dips, just the tip of this oil slick. 6 foot, they said, cake batter thighs, a woman in waiting. I asked my body where we were going, and I haven't grown an inch since. That night, I sat in front of the mirror, legs apart, like I was reading a blurb. It feels like nobody heard I was muttering boy when everybody else was whispering girl. So, 5'3" I'm saying, you can pass me all your stiff-lipped jars. I'll hold open every door for you and pay on the first date. I'll never shed another tear and become a football hooligan. I'll wear the patriarchy with pride and slop my hands between your rib cage instead of saying, excuse me, I'm just playing. Just trying to say I'm a man, whatever that means. That I've been rotating in limbo for years. That non-binary isn't feeling quite right, but I settled into the midpoint of that all do darling. I'm saying no more, 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 no more. I'm saying I'm terrified of being perceived as a black man as much as I want to be. I'm saying I'm afraid the cat won't respond to my voice by the end of the year. That my mum, with her attempts of warmth, will mistake me for a cold caller, that I will no longer be seen as queer from a mile away, but an abnormality from up close. I'm just waiting for the day that I'm on a train and the inspector asks, have you got a ticket? And I'll say, no, but I'd like to buy one. My body and I are building a house today.
My gripe is, this might be controversial because some people like it, but I hate it, is when like companies or like places or projects are like, if you're a person of color or you're queer, we'll prioritize you. And if it has something to do with that, I get it, but like I've seen things that have nothing to do with that, and I'm just like, that's great. I think it's cool that you're doing that, but I don't want you to pick me because I'm black and or gay. I want you to pick me because I'm good and talented, and I don't want to just fit your box. Yeah, it's always made me feel weird, and I know some people think it's a good thing. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but I don't. If it's to do with that, then yeah, sure. But if not, I don't know.
I don't think that's something for you to be or anyone to be apologetic about. And that's just because I'm savage. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. I'm gonna lean into whatever strength it is I have because society at large has done me, or the world at large has done me a great disservice. So if leaning into my nature, my truth as a queer, talented, beautiful black man is gonna get me that funding, I would. Because everyone does it. Everyone leans into their strength. So sorry, not sorry.
So when your art from inception is just from this lens or in a space of blackness, and you are collectively in purpose. So let's say if me and 5 other black queer people decide that we're going to create art, it may not be about queerness, it may not be about blackness, it may just be about politics, but it's just done pretty. But we have a common goal. So through that common goal, we can then do the work in interrogation, holding each other accountable, doing the actual like healing and giving each other enough space so that when we do create the work, it is a reflection of us. I feel like that's what we're not really getting in mainstream funding. It's through the little places that you can get some money to get a grant, to get a computer, or so you can help pay your rent, or like so you can pay for studio time. Because people don't have that. I worked in a gallery that had studio space and used to throw people pay you monthly. They're just here all the time. They got 2 places they could live in. That doesn't make any sense to me. Because I don't have the privilege or the money to be able to throw that away. So when there's a grant that is looking for people like me, I'm going to run to that more than I'm going to try run for NPO funding or any sort of other funding where I know that there's so many people that I may not even be what they're thinking of. I may not be the vibe that week, innit?
First of all, funders in their head have quotas of how much representation they want to give at any given time. And you need to know where your money comes from. If your money comes from somewhere like the Arts Council or the National Lottery, they also have standards that they want to uphold because their view is we are showing the best of Britain, right? So you have to think of it in that context. If they want to show the best of the diverse, is that we listen to the struggles of the Black, queer, marginalized. We gave this poor person some money, rather than the best of Britain is, look, we just gave you time to explore whatever you want to explore. They can't show an outcome from that. And I think that's the problem of the funders. A lot of their decision making is based on what's the outcome, how is this going to benefit us as an institution, versus how can we nurture creative talent in our country, how can we give them time, rest and resources to actually create what they want to create, how do we nurture organic creation within our country. They don't care about that. They care about their quotas, they care about their percentage, making sure that it's just enough blackness but not too much blackness, because this is not a black thing.
It speaks about the wider society of the art sector, which doesn't do the work. They just know the buzzwords, they just know the vibes, and no one's actually decided to, okay, if we are going to have people of color here, if we're going to have any person of color or any demographic intersection, whatever intersection they hold, we should do some training before they get there, so they're not the guinea pigs, so you're not the first person we've ever met that's black and maybe disabled. And because I don't want to then have those awkward conversations. You put your staff, you put new people in these roles in harm when you haven't done the work. So if it's just that now, yeah, your organization and you've never had any black people there, but I'm going to give you funding to support people, but you've not done any of the basic research in the 21st century as an organization, should have done some diversity research in every aspect, from ableism to neurodivergent to race, and you haven't done that. You don't really care. You don't care as an organization, you don't care as a funding body, and then someone suffers. And I feel like that's the issue, is that they don't do the consultancy. They don't ask anyone to come and check out this organization, and if it's actually safe enough for it to even start the process. You just start the process and go, well, why aren't they happy? Why isn't it happening? Why are they all quitting?
We're thinking about money. Anything that's being operated under capitalism, it's never going to be constructed with care, regardless of what people say. So if you're an arts institution, the person at the highest, tip top of the mountain is going to be a cis-het white man, most likely. So at the end of the day, people are creating all of these things and creating these opportunities, but obviously they're looking out for their own pockets. And sometimes even if an organization or an institution or an arts collective is saying that they're anti-capitalist, likelihood is they're problematic in some other way, and they're perpetuating probably the most violence, because they're the ones that are screaming loud and proud that they're all diverse and they don't adhere to these standards, but they're perpetuating it.
There's been a lot of talking around sort of decolonization, but I'm seeing a lot of that happening now by white academics, and I think it's becoming a kind of claiming of a term that could have been really radical and really important, and that white people absolutely should be part of. It's not like, we just let black people get on with it because we're part of this too. We need to be part of that process of decolonizing. But it's become a bit of a kind of, I don't know what the right word is, something that you kind of wave. Do you know what I mean?
When whiteness is a default, if you see a performance of all black people, you're going to be like, oh, not sure if that one's for me, because, it's all black people and I just feel like I might not get it. But when I go see the Nutcracker, Swan Lake, and it's all white performers, I'm like, beautiful, look at them ballerinas leaping. I'm not thinking, hey, there wasn't one single black ballerina in that thing. I'm just admiring the art, because I have not been accustomed to knowing that I will be represented everywhere I go. So yeah, I feel like the funders have a lot of work to do to unlearn that.
So my name is Kiali Tingang, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist and designer, mainly working in textiles and moving image. And I really wanted to apply for Black, Queer and Done because it felt like a really good definition of myself. and I felt really attracted to the In-Between-Ness theme, because being queer and being black, specifically Cameroonian, but then also being born in Britain, there's always been a sense of like not fitting into several different worlds, even though you're part of them, but you're not really part of anything, and you can't lay claim to anything, but you can claim them all at the same time. So I've always felt like a bit of a middle of a Venn diagram, but also like not part of that said diagram. And I think in responding to that with my piece, which is sort of about using Cameroonian culture in the context of queer culture and taking up space, queer Cameroonians who fill that kind of in-between space and kind of feel a bit seen.
I think my utopia, I think my utopia would be something like, and then maybe it's, I think when I think about unity, people think of it in this very bordered nation thing, where I feel like community would be no bordered, and that's how art would work. So it would be like how I'm sure Brownton Abbey is going to be touring and making sure that they are prioritizing the communities that they are reflective of. If we had our collectives, for example, that had certain ethos or certain beliefs, and they had the money or funding, whether it was through our borders or governments, or if it's through National Art Lottery or whatever, if they had the opportunity to create and connect, and for art to do more than just entertain, but like to entertain and connect, and for that to be a different process, I think that would be more utopic for me. Yeah,
I would say that we would have the resources and reparations to rest, to recoup, to have time to go on a healing journey for ourselves without, we talk about outcomes when it comes to funding, but like we have our reparations and we're able to just exist without outcomes. We're able to just, create art for the sake of creating art. We can just be, I don't know, like the queer and like spirit touched. I think a lot of us are, like, we're navigating spirit first and not afraid of the repercussions that the white cis hetero patriarchy is insisting upon us.
I mean, I think first of all, it's not at all for me to define, I think, or to attempt to define, but I think that I imagine that part of that happening and the process of that happening means that people who aren't Black are going to need to become more rigorously self-reflective and do that more and really sort of put the work in and listen and I think be part of it, be part of making that happen, but figure out how it is that we make that happen, I guess. And I think actually a lot of what needs to happen to get to that point is white people also talking to other white people about what that might look like. Because I think too often it becomes a kind of like, Black or brown person, tell me what I need to be doing, or, let me learn from you and listen from you. And of course we need to do that, but I think it can't just be a kind of like, you tell me what to do kind of thing. I think there needs to be more of that sort of, awareness of what racism is and what these structures are among white people having these conversations together. It's not just the conversation that happens in a certain space with certain people there. It sort of comes across into everything. So I think that's what, for me, it would look like, a more kind of critical, self-reflective, aware sense of what it is to actually be white within all of that.
I think my utopia looks like a space where people are learning, but not necessarily that they've got it yet. That because that's kind of how the Black queer community is right now. People will have a lot of like self-denial, and they'll say, oh no, I'm this right now, or they'll maybe come towards an evolution of who they are, and just being able to have a utopia where characters are having conversations about what they're learning as they're being themselves, and how different events are shaping what they know about themselves. That's so much more valuable than a character who's just like, oh yeah, this is who I am.
People being able to be their authentic and genuine selves, Black and white queer people and just Black and white people in general being able to create stuff and it looked at in the same merit. Like, I don't know if I'm making this up, but I feel like if a white person was to create something quite avant-garde and a Black person was to do it, it would be perceived very differently. Yeah, I don't know how true that is, but I think that. So yeah, just the same standards being held to people, and more gay shit. I don't know. Yeah, that's always my answer, I think. Yeah.
And this is personal. No one should come for my head, please. It will be the absence of color, and why I say that is not to negate every single thing the Black community has gone through. Is that I do feel like there's, I mean, as artists, we all battle with imposter syndrome. And that's something I'm going to, I don't know about if someone has been able to conquer it, but personally, that's something I deal with every day. Am I good enough? Am I a fraud? Am I getting this because I know someone? Am I getting this because I'm Black? Am I getting this because I'm a token in this space? So for me, it would be, utopia would be the absence of color, because I feel like my art, my talents, and my voice can actually just really speak for me, and I will feel like everything I am doing and achieving is solely because of my talent, and not because I've had to fight my way for years to be able to be recognized, not because I am that token in the midst of white people or any of those kind of things. It's just raw, pure talent and euphoria in what I do, and that is why I have what I have, and I am recognized and celebrated for who I am, not just because I'm a Black person, but because I'm a talented human being.
It looks raw, it looks real, it looks joyful, it looks authentic, it looks intersectional, multifaceted. Um, I feel like it looks like those moments as queer people. I think we individually have these moments where we do find true queer Black joy and love and community. I feel like it looks like and feels like that.
My utopia, right? First of all, we get rid of this grayness. We've got to have sun 24/7, 365. But then, in terms of an art perspective, my utopia would have universal access. So we would have basic income and universal healthcare for everyone. So you're not worrying about the things external to you, and you'll be given space to create, and you'll be given resources to create, and that artist is a valuable and how do I say it? Like validated career, so that the myth of the struggling artist can be dissolved, because just as doctors save lives, I do believe that art has a capacity to save lives, right? But I also feel like in terms of a Black queer perspective, that we are listened to but given the space to create, without those weird outcomes and evaluation forms, that we are given reparations for the things that we have to go through. That's my idea of utopia. And reparation is not to ease the guilt of the oppressing party. It is to restore. It is to reconnect and to build on what we have already.
Like drop.
I love it.
Black, queer, and done. Documenting the Black queer experience, a film focused on featuring broad melanated variants. We're not here to shock. There's no cheap thrills, crass edits. These are real queer Black people. Their lives continue past the credits. To exist whilst you're Black, to live life whilst you're queer, can be loaded and layered, and sometimes barely there. Representation does matter, but it's also the kind. Media fetishization, an esoterical bind. Where are the queer alpha males, or the femme feminists, or the gay heteronormatives who absolutely exist? Where's the quietness of queer, or the nuanced in-between-ness? If gender is really fluid, then show the spectrum of its realness. When it comes to the media, culture, or art, those who are most often profiled play performative parts. For if it's not full fat queer, if it's not in your face, Will the media or art funder give your queer art queer space? If you don't camp it up, if you don't add sachet, well, then how will audiences know that you're really gay? Enough with homogeneity and white gay male fragility. Can we black queers get our props? Can you say yes to our ability? Can you give thanks to the very people who add colour to your community? Do you see how race is still a barrier for true LGBT plus unity? Your quite white lens is simply not equipped to cope with our blackety black technicolor queer kaleidoscope. There's a breadth to being queer. There's no single way to be one. Let us show you how we do. Because we're black, we're queer. And done.